Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Nimisha Jadon from School of Studies Environmental Chemistry, Jivaji University, Gwalior. Today we are going to discuss about the atomic emission spectroscopy under the paper of Fundamentals of Analytical Chemistry. The learning objective of this module including the introduction of emission spectroscopy, its theory, then the relation of emission spectroscopy to flame photometry, instrumentation and its application. In emission spectroscopy, a sample is excited by absorbing thermal or electric energy, and the radiation emitted by the excited sample is studied for both qualitative and for the quantitative analysis. Most of the spectroscopic techniques are related to the molecules, but emission spectroscopy is related to atoms. Therefore, this technique is used as the method of elemental metal analysis. With it, all the metallic elements can be identified and quantitatively determined in very low concentration, as can be metalloids such as arsenic, silicon and selenium. The earlier, either solid, liquid or gases can be analyzed quite easily by this method, but most of the samples are solids or evaporated solids. The liquid solids are occasionally analyzed, whereas gaseous samples are rarely analyzed. Emission spectroscopy is regarded as the most reliable method for chemical quantitative analysis available at present. If proper precautions are taken, the method can be used for the qualitative as well as the quantitative analysis of about 70 elements at concentration levels as low as 1 ppm. एक मिनट, नीचे की जो थ्योरी है ये मुझे लग रहा है कि शायद हमने Now we discuss here about the theory of atomic emission spectroscopy. For this, first of all, we have discussed here about the spectra. When a beam of light allowed to pass through a prism or grating, it is broken up into its constituent colors. This array of color is known as spectrum, and the spectrum what we see is only the visible region, which extends from 4000 to 8000 angstrom. However, the complete spectrum may extend over very wide range of analysis. The first one part is the ultraviolet region, and then second one is the visible region, and the third one is the infrared region. Now we discuss here about the various types of spectra. There are two principal classes of spectra known as emission spectra and the absorption spectra. Let us discuss these one of one. The first one is the emission spectra. When a substance is heated to a high temperature by thermal or electric method, light is emitted. When the light coming after passing through a prism or a grating is examined with a spectroscope, the spectrum so obtained is known as emission spectrum. This types of spectrum is obtained whenever matter in the bulk is heated. For example, incandescent solids like iron or carbon emit continuous spectra when they are heated until they glow. Continuous spectra do not depend upon the chemical composition but rather on the temperature. Therefore, continuous spectra cannot be used for spectrochemical analysis, and these spectra are avoided by volatilizing sample before the excitation. The number one is the band spectra. A band spectra is given out by the excited molecules each molecule emits bands which are characteristics of the molecule concerned, and that is why we call this as molecular spectrum also. A band spectrum consists of a group of lines so close together that under ordinary conditions they appear into continuous bands. In emission spectroscopy, we are not interested in band spectra. This can be avoided by providing sufficient energy to molecules so that they be broken up into individual atoms. The next one is the line spectra. A line spectrum consists of a discrete irregularly lines. This type of spectrum is obtained when the light emitting substances is in the atomic state. Therefore, it is also called atomic spectrum. In molecules, there are vibrational and rotational energy levels which are superimposed on the electronic energy levels, but in atoms there are only electronic energy levels. Line spectrum depends upon the type of atoms. Therefore, it is of predominant type in emission spectroscopy. The origin of line spectrum can be explained on the basis of Bohr's theory. If an atom is in the ground state, its electrons are present in the lower permitted energy levels. The next one is the absorption spectra. When the light from the source emitting a continuous spectrum is first passed through an absorbing substance and then absorbed through a spectroscope, it will be observed that certain lines are missing in the spectrum, which leaves dark lines or bands at this place. As the light of wavelengths corresponding to black bands is absorbed by the substance through which the light is passed, the spectrum so obtained is known as an absorption spectrum. The types of emission spectra. As we are only interested in emission spectra, we will only discuss here its type. The emission spectra are of three types. The number one is the continuous spectrum. The continuous spectrum is characterized by generally uninterrupted emissions over a considerable wavelength region and by the absence of sharp lines or discrete bands. When the atoms get excited by electric or thermal method, its electrons move from inner orbital to outer orbitals. The excited electrons rapidly emit a photon of energy and occupy the orbital with the lowest energy or ground state. The emitted radiation from the excited atoms in the form of discrete spectral lines forms the basis of emission spectroscopy. Next one is the excitation energy requirement. In order for any element to emit a single spectral line, energy equivalent to the excitation potential of the element must be absorbed. On the other hand, the complete spectrum is only possible when the energy equivalent to the ionization potential must be absorbed. By using an enough energetic source, and the element in the periodic table could be excited to produce emission spectra. But most of the spectral lines fall in the vacuum ultraviolet region, which cannot be studied very easily. Therefore, emission spectroscopy is mainly limited to metals and metalloids and not the non-metals. Another problem in emission spectroscopy is the sensitivity, which is inversely proportional to the complexity of atomic spectra. For example, spectra of alkali metals are simple and can be studied very easily because their spectra consist of 12 or so widely spaced lines of definite wavelength having good sensitivity. Thus, if the sample has sodium, its emission spectrum will show up yellow lines of sodium of high sensitivity even if only traces are present. On the other hand, emission spectrum shows up thousands of lines. As the emission source has a fixed amount of energy, the energy will be divided up among thousands of lines, thus reducing the sensitivity of each line. Therefore, it becomes difficult to study the complex spectra of elements like uranium, etc. Now we discuss here about the relation of emission spectroscopy to flame photometry. The emission spectrography was developed after flame photometry. With flame, it was clear that the energy source was low and that the procedure was most useful for group 1 and 2 metals, but much less useful analytically for the transition metals or the metalloids. In emission spectrography, an electric discharge is used to excite the metals of interest. The effective electronic temperature of the electrical discharge is reported to be up to 4000 to 6000 K. Whereas in flame photometry, the most commonly used emission lines are those arising from the transition between the first excited state and the ground state. In emission spectroscopy, these lines are only used when the highest sensitivity is required. At higher concentration, these lines tend to become self-absorbed and reverse in intensity. They are said to be reversible lines. This line reversal makes quantitative analysis very difficult to interpret. Consequently, non-reversible lines are preferred, and these lines arise from the transition between two excited states but never the ground state. Since the population of the atoms in each of these excited states is always very low, self-absorption is minor and usually a linear relationship obtained between the emission intensity and the concentration of the elements. In summary, therefore, emission spectroscopy has three major advantages over the flame photometry. First, it is much more universal in application, and second, it can utilize transition between the upper excited state and measures line which are not reversible at increased concentration. Discuss here about the instrumentation of emission spectroscopy. In emission spectroscopy, the sample is excited by thermal or electric method and thus becomes the source of radiation. Then the radiation is passed through a monochromator to select the desired wavelength and finally passed on into the detector, which measures the radiation for qualitative analysis. The various individual components of the equipment are discussed here as excitation source. Any excitation for emission spectroscopy must accomplish the following processes that include: the sample must be vaporized, it must be dissociated into atoms, the electrons in the atoms must be excited to the higher energy levels above the ground state, it should be capable to excite atoms of all the elements of interest, then it should provide sufficient line intensity so as to detect these lines within detection limit, and then it should provide reproducible excitation conditions from sample to sample. The various sources of excitation including the flames. The flame is used for those molecules which do not require very high temperature for excitation and dissociation into atoms. Different flames having different temperatures are used in emission spectroscopy. Here this table shows the temperature of commonly used fuels and oxidants in the flame. Generally used fuel and the oxidant is the natural gas or the acetylene with the combination of air or oxygen. The temperature of the flame is determined by several factors including the type of fuel and oxidant, the fuel to oxidant ratio, types of burner, and the region in flame that is focused into the entrance slit of the spectral isolation unit. At a particular temperature, the dissociation of molecules and excitation of atom takes place. The flames are inexpensive but stable and reproducible sources which are capable of handling many analytical problems. Flame temperature and flame composition have an influence on interference that may cause erroneous readings to occur. The next one is the direct current arc. This is one of the most versatile excitation device for both quantitative and spectrochemical emission analysis. The figure shows the essential components of a circuit for a direct current arc. The DC source is usually a regulated power supply that furnishes 110 to 120 volt at 3 to 30 ampere. Then the current is made to flow across the arc gap in a series with a variable resistor R and an inductance coil L. The sample in the form of a solid or a liquid is capped on the lower electrode in the arc gap. The initial resistance of the arc gap is too high to permit conductance. So here the functions of the variable resistance in the circuit R is to adjust the current, whereas inductance coil L stabilizes the flow of the current. Now we discuss here about the advantages of direct current. It includes the high temperature generated in the DC arc makes it a very sensitive excitation source. The excitation energy provided by this arc is not electrical but mainly thermal and is thus sufficient for exciting all the metal elements. By this arc, emission species are neutral atoms rather than ions. While operating direct current arc, one may come across the following difficulties, which includes: in the direct current arc, the resistance falls rapidly as its current increases. Therefore, the resistance should be adjusted very carefully to limit the current. The temperature varies along the length of the arc. Near the cathode, the temperature is maximum. For this reason, the samples are kept on the cathode where they quickly undergo vaporization. As arc is discharged between the anode and a small spot on the cathode, it wanders over the cathode surface and therefore current fluctuation result from the changing arc length and temperature. Such arc wanders result in fluctuations in emission intensities from moment to moment. The next one is the alternating current arc. Here in this figure shows the essential components of the circuit of an alternating current arc. Here the high voltage of 2000 to 500 volt is maintained by the transformer and this voltage helps the arc to jump the gap. A current of 1 to 5 ampere is maintained in the primary circuit by adjusting a variable inductance. As the arc picks out a new surface area after each cycle, the whole surface of the sample is arced and excited. One more effect of the stop anti-start nature of step up this source is that the gap temperature is much less than with the direct current arc with a lower sensitivity. The next one is the alternating current spark. Here the figure illustrates a circuit for alternating current spark source. It is a primary circuit. A voltage of 110 to 220 is maintained, which is stepped up to 10,000 to 40,000 by the step up transformation. The auxiliary spark gap is operated by a motor whose rotation is synchronous with the alternation of line current. During half a cycle, the capacitor stores up the charge and when it is charged to the maximum, The synchronous motor allows the circuit to be completed, causing a spark across the analytical spark gap. The auxiliary spark gap is operated by a motor whose rotation is synchronous with the alteration of line current and causes the spark across the analytical spark gap. The alternating current arc source is one of the best source for quantitative analysis because it is very stable and reproducible. On the other hand, it is not fit for qualitative analysis because the excitation of the sample is mainly electrical. Now the second part is the electrodes. The electrodes used in emission spectroscopy are of two types. The number one is the self electrode and the next one is the graphite electrode. When the material under the investigation is a good conductor and can withstand high temperature, the material as such is used for the electrode. Such type of electrodes are known as self electrodes. For example, analyzing alloys or metal powders can be pressed into solid discs or cylinders to be used as electrodes. When the substance under the investigation is not a good conductor and cannot withstand high temperature, it is placed in a small cavity of the lower graphite electrode, whereas the upper electrode is also made up of graphite, which is brought to a point in a pencil sharpener. Most of the graphite electrode have center post or arc notched to give a narrow neck or both. Now the third one part is the sample holder. The function of the sample holder is to introduce the sample into the electrical discharge. There are two types of sample holders, namely those for solid sample and those for the liquid sample. The solid sample holder are of many kind of samples that may be determined by emission spectrography. Different metals and alloy, wood, plastic, paints, polymers, soil, seawater and so on. The problem is usually overcome by dissolving the sample in a known solvent such as aluminum oxide, silicon oxide or carbon containing compounds and drying to form the powder. Consequently, many sample ends up as solid after the pre-treatment. The many samples are therefore handled by being first reduced to the powder and then loaded into the carbon sample holder. After it is loaded, the sample holder is placed in position as one of the electrode used in the discharge. While the electrical discharge takes place from the top surface of the electrode and the sample is vaporized into the plasma of the discharge and the spectrographic emission takes place. Two commonly used sample holders for liquid are shown here in the figure. The porous base of the cup container shown in figure A permits the liquid sample to percolate through it at a steady rate into the electrical discharge. The sample slowly runs into the discharge, which can be sustained until the base of the holders is burned away. This may be several minutes, which is ample time to complete an analysis. One difficulty with this holder is that dissolved solid, for example sodium chloride, in the sample tend to form a crust at the base of the sample holder, causing erratic results. To obtain reproducible results, dissolved solids should be less than 1% of the sample. The samples with a high dissolved solids content should be dried and ashed and run as solid samples. The rotating disc in figure B rotates through a liquid sample which wets the surface of the disc. The rotating wet surface carries the sample into the discharge at a steady rate. The disc rotates steadily for several minutes or as long as necessary, emitting the radiation from the excited sample in the discharge. In practice, it is found that initially the surface of the wheel is smooth and carries only a small quantity of sample into the discharge. After the first revolution, the surface is roughened by exposure to the electrical discharge and carries an increased amount of liquid sample into the discharge. The emission intensity increases further with two revolutions. However, subsequent revolutions have little effects. The signal is then steady and can be measured at that time. The calibration data must be obtained under identical conditions. Each type of liquid sample holder is most useful for aqueous or inert solution. Organic solution tend to ignite in the discharge and cause erratic emission. This problem is particularly bad when the rotating disc electrode is used. Now the next is the monochromators. In emission spectroscopy, both prism and grating monochromators are used. The functions of the monochromator is to separate the various lines of the sample's emission spectrum. The number one is the prism monochromator. In order for a prism to be used as a monochromator, it should be transparent to UV radiation. For this reason, prisms are made from quartz or silica fused. When the light of one wavelength is passed through the quartz prism, it emerges from the prism as two lines. This causes the loss of the half of the light intensity and also complicates the interpretation of the spectrum. Both these difficulties make qualitative and quantitative analysis difficult. These drawbacks can be overcome by using two-half prism. The first half splits the light into two beams, whereas the second half combines them to a single beam as shown here in the figure, and this is also known as Cornu type of prism. The next one is the grating monochromators. The use of grating monochromators has resulted in the development of sophisticated equipments with better resolution. In spite of high cost of the grating monochromators, it has replaced prism as a dispersing element. The main reason is that a grating gives a linear dispersion. Thus, the resolution is constant and independent of wavelength. Therefore, the problem of identifying the wavelength of emission line on a photographic plate has been solved. By employing grating monochromators, the identification of lines becomes very simple. Once a known reference line is identified, other lines can be identified very easily. The main disadvantage of grating monochromator is that higher order wavelengths overlaps, but this can be overcome by using filters or by using detectors which are not sensitive to the higher orders. The next type of monochromators are the Ashley monochromators. In recent years, Ashley monochromators have been increasingly used in emission spectroscopy. Although this technique has been known for many years, it was mostly of academic interest only. The basic principle is to use two dispersive elements in tandem, a prism and a grating. These are placed so that the prism disperses the light in one plane and the dispersed light falls on the grating, which disperses in the plane at right angle to the plane of dispersion of the prism. The net result is that the final dispersion into two wavelengths takes place over a two-dimensional plane rather than along a single linear array as practiced in the Rowland circuit optics and discussed here in the figure shown here. The radiation intensity is measured using numerous photomultipliers which are located on a grid. The next is slits. All spectrographs are fitted with entrance and the exit slits. Entrance slits keep out stray light and permits only the light from the sample to enter the optical path. Exit slits placed after the monochromator stop all but the desired wavelength range from reaching the detector. It is the image of the slit that reaches the detector. The slits are usually created by the parting of two parallel metal strips. The width and the height of the slit may be manually adjusted independently. A narrow slit is necessary to obtain resolution of two lines at similar wavelength. If the slit is too wide, both line passes through the slit and reach the detector without being resolved. If the slit is too narrow, there is a loss in the intensity of the radiation. Now the next is the detector. There are two types of detectors are widely used, that is photomultipliers and the photographic plates or films. For the qualitative analytical studies, photographic plates or films are used. The photomultiplier are used for the quantitative analysis. There are advantages of using photographic plates over photomultipliers for the detection in emission spectroscopy as follows. A large number of spectral lines can be recorded simultaneously, and the photographic plate provides a permanent record of the spectrum. Then the emission intensity can be integrated by a photographic emulsion over a period of time. In emission spectroscopy, ultraviolet and visible regions are important. The photographic emulsion are preferred because of their high sensitivity throughout these regions. The cost of an emission spectrograph having photographic detector is much less than that having photomultiplier detector. The next is the photographic detection. In most of the spectrographs, except the direct readers, the intensity of spectral lines is registered on a photographic emulsion, and this is developed by a suitable developer in the recommended developing time at a particular temperature. The density of a film is measured by a densitometer. Now we discuss here about the photomultiplier detection. The direct reading emission spectrographs involves the photomultiplier tubes for detection instead of a photographic plate. These instruments are less versatile than the spectrographs using spectrographic plates because we require a large number of photomultipliers tubes for detecting different emissions lines simultaneously. For this reason, direct reading instruments are very costly. As these are very fast, convenient and more precise, these are preferred. Then the spectrograph. Emission spectra may be examined by means of an optical arrangement that will identify component frequencies and their intensity. This optical arrangement is known by several names. For example, it is termed as spectroscope if it involves the visual device. It is termed as the spectrograph if it records many wavelengths simultaneously either by photographic means. It is termed as the spectrometer if it scans a spectrum. Except spectroscope, both spectrograph and the spectrometer determine intensities. The next is the prism instrument. The optical system of a simple prism spectrometer is discussed here in the figure. It consists of an excitation source, an entrance slit, a collimator lens, a dispersing prism and an eyepiece through which the spectrum is observed. Sometimes eyepiece is replaced by a camera so that the entire spectra can be photographed directly without any difficulty. The next one is the grating instrument. In principle, a grating could be substituted for the prism in prism spectrograph, keeping the rest of the arrangement the same. A grating spectrograph is preferred because a grating gives linear dispersion and therefore the resolution is constant and independent of wavelength. Commercial grating spectrographs are available with variety of mountings. Now the next is application of emission spectroscopy. Emission spectroscopy is used for elemental qualitative and quantitative analysis, but this provides very little direct information about the molecular form of the sample. The number one is qualitative analysis. The emission spectroscopy is a destructive procedure offering the possibility of qualitative identifying and quantitatively determining most of the metals. It is for elemental analysis only and provides no information regarding the bonding in either molecules or alloy. The comparison of spectra and line. The qualitative identification of the elements may be obtained by comparison of the sample spectrum with the spectrum produced by pure known standard samples, or the wavelengths of the spectrum of the sample may be measured and compared to values to standard tables. Now we discuss here about the last lines or the RU lines. As the concentration of a metallic elements in a powder mixture is made successively more and more dilute, the number and the intensities of the lines in the resulting spectra will vary. The more concentrated the element, the more complex the obtained spectrum. Upon dilution, the weaker lines disappear and the stronger lines become less intense. Ultimately, only the stronger lines remains. Quantitative analysis. Now here we are discussing some of the procedures employed in quantitative spectrographic analysis. The number one is the comparison sample method. In this method, the spectra of the unknown sample and the various standards are photographed alternately on the same plate under the same set of conditions. After developing the plate, one can calculate the concentration of the desired constituents by comparing the blackening of the lines of these constituents with the same lines on the standard. The visual or the photometric comparison of blackening may be used. The next one method is the internal standard method. In this method, an internal standard is selected. Its known amount is added to the sample. It is not essential that the internal standard element should not be present in the original sample because this would not allow our knowing the total amount present. When the sample having internal standard is excited in the electrical discharge, the sample as well as the internal standard emit the spectral lines. The next one is the spectrographic standards. In addition to the choice of an internal standard, a most critical phase in the development of a spectrographic method involves the preparation or the acquisition of a set of standard samples from which a calibration curve is prepared. In some cases, standards can be synthesized from pure chemicals and the solution samples are most readily prepared by this method. Optics of an emission spectrograph for simultaneous multi-elements analysis that we are going to discuss here. We can also use a photomultiplier detector to measure the intensity of any emissions line. Automatic analyzers commonly utilizes as many as 12 photomultipliers simultaneously. Here we are discussing about the specific applications. Emission spectroscopy has been used in many fields to provide useful information. Some of these are as follows. Number one, metals and alloy. The iron and steel as well as the aluminum industries are based on emission spectroscopic analysis in all steps of their processes. For example, the presence of nickel, chromium, silicon, manganese, molybdenum, copper and many more metals etc. in iron and steel has been determined on a routine basis by using automatic emission spectrograph. Then the second one is the oils. One is interested to know that the trace elements present in crude oil because some of these can poison the catalysis used in the cracking process. Some of these traces elements are vanadium, copper, nickel and iron, and it is also analyzed by using emission spectrophotograph. Then the next one is the animals and the main. The emission spectroscopy has been used for the analysis of many elements including sodium, potassium, zinc, copper, calcium, magnesium, nickel, iron that are present in the tissues of animals and the men. And next one is for the application in plants and soils. The emission spectroscopy has been used to detect 40 elements in plants and soil. This has been done to diagnose the efficiency problem in plants. When these are known, one can suggest the application of deficient elements through the soil application or through the spray applied to the leaves. Here, the following brief list will give a sampling of the great variety of materials and elements being analyzed by emission spectroscopy, that including ceramics for both traces and the major constituent, metals for trace metal constituent as well as oxygen and nitrogen, aluminum for traces of cobalt, graphite for the traces of cobalt, nickel, molybdenum and vanadium, spent nuclear fuels for rare earth, blood for trace amounts of calcium, copper and zinc, then pancreas tissue for zinc, and the high purity acids and other analytical reagents for a variety of trace metal impurities. Now we discuss here about the advantages and disadvantages of the emission spectroscopy. It may be useful to summarize the major advantages and the disadvantages of emission spectroscopy over other analytical techniques. The outstanding advantages are the following. The number one, it is an excellent method of elemental trace analysis, typically detecting element at the parts per million level. It can be used for the metals and the metalloids and occasionally other elements as well. A small sample is sufficient for the analysis. If suitable comparison standards have been prepared, the time required for the analysis is short, particularly if a direct reading instrument is available. The method can be used for routine quality control work, and if automated can provide analytical results on previously selected elements in 30 seconds to 1 minute. This is an ideal method for the analysis of a wide variety of samples like geological samples, metals, alloys, plants, forensic exhibit, soils and the environmental and the biological samples. The disadvantages of emission spectroscopy including the cost of emission spectroscopy is very high, especially when we require the large instrument for analyzing heavy metals or very complex samples. The samples get destroyed in the process of analysis. This method cannot be used for concentrated solution. It is difficult to get high precision if the constituent desired is present in a concentration much above the 30%. Thus, the emission spectroscopy is ideal for trace elemental analysis and therefore makes it uncompetitive with other methods which are used for concentrated solutions. So at the end of this module, the present we can conclude it that the present module describes about the emission spectroscopy, in which the sample is being excited by the electric or the thermal energy, and the radiation emitted by the excited sample is studied for both the qualitative and the quantitative analysis. Here we also discuss about the various components of this emission spectrophotometer and its application in the various fields. Thank you so much.